My name is Ariana Winslow and I am 23 years old. I live with my 3 brothers, Matthew, Ethan and Gabriel. Our dad passed away in a car accident while rushing to the hospital from work to see my mother, who was about to give birth to me. My mother was determined not to give birth before my dad arrived. Because of the complications, the doctors had to perform a C-section to deliver me. The next day, when my mother received the news of her husband's death, she left the hospital and has been missing ever since. No one knows where she went. This is a brief story that my brothers have shared with me. Now, let me give you some insight into how I was raised by my brothers. My brothers became my pillars of support from a young age. They were just teenagers when our father passed away, but they stepped up and took on the responsibility of raising me. Even though they had no idea of how to raise a newborn, especially a girl, they raised me. They became my protectors, my role models, and my best friends. Growing up in a household dominated by boys wasn't always easy, but my brothers made sure I never felt left out. They included me in their activities and taught me how to play every kind of sport. They always made sure I felt loved and cared for, despite the absence of our mother, whom they hate to this day. Gabriel, the oldest of us, took on the role of a father figure. He was always there to give me advice, help with my homework, and teach me life skills. He had a calm and patient demeanour, making him the perfect person to turn to when I needed guidance. Ethan, the middle child, was the fun-loving and adventurous one. He would take me on spontaneous trips to the park, play imaginative games with me, and always managed to make me laugh. He had a knack for turning ordinary moments into extraordinary adventures. Matthew, the youngest of my brothers, was the nurturer. He had a kind and gentle soul, always looking out for me and making sure I felt safe. He was the one who would comfort me during my darkest moments and remind me that everything would be okay. Together, my brothers created a loving and supportive environment for me to grow up in. They filled the void left by our parents' absence and taught me the importance of family bonds. They were not just my brothers, they were my family, my protectors, and my greatest allies. As the years went by, we faced many challenges, but we faced them together. We celebrated each other's successes and supported each other through failures. We were a team, and we knew that as long as we had each other, we could overcome anything. As a 23-year-old now, I can't help but feel grateful for the upbringing I had. I may have missed out on having traditional parents, but I gained something far more precious, a bond with my brothers that will last a lifetime. They taught me resilience, independence, and the importance of unconditional love. I miss and still hold on to the hope that one day I will find our mother and bring her back into our lives. But my 2 brothers aren't welcome to that idea. So it's only me and Matthew who are into the idea. Today was the day the long-awaited mall in my county village opened, and I had to go. But my brothers wouldn't let me go alone without them shadowing my every step. And it pissed me off at times. Guys, I know you worry a lot, but I will be fine. I'm not a 5-year-old girl anymore. I'm a grown-up woman now. I need some privacy and space as a woman, I exclaimed, but my 2 brothers just stared at me, saying nothing, making the situation worse. Please, I will be fine. It's not like I'll be kidnapped or something, I retorted. I promise to come back before Gabriel returns. Fine, but make sure you return as soon as possible, Ethan said, giving a no-joking look that scares the hell out of me. Deal, I replied before heading out. Strolling through the mall, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was beyond my expectation. The polished floors gleamed beneath my feet as I browsed through the glamorous displays of clothing, jewellery, and gadgets. Despite being a small town, this mall had brought a touch of luxury that had the whole community buzzing. As I wandered from store to store, I felt a slight discomfort gnawing at my abdomen. Ignoring it, I continued my window shopping adventure, my eyes alight with curiosity at the array of items on display. However, the discomfort soon intensified, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. Realization dawned as I hurried towards the ladies' restroom. With a sigh, I discovered my unwelcome visitor had arrived unannounced my periods. Panic swirled in my chest as I frantically searched my bag, only to find it devoid of the one thing I desperately needed: pads. Without hesitation, I reached for my phone and called my brother's number. "Hey, Ari, what's up?" Matthew's voice sounded cheerful on the other end of the line. "Matt, I need your help," I blurted out, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'm at the mall and I'm in the ladies' restroom and I've started my period, but I don't have any pads with me." There was a brief pause before Matthew responded, his tone understanding as always. "No worries, sis. I'll be there in a jiffy. Just stay put, okay?" "Okay," I replied before hanging up the phone, grateful for my Matthew's unwavering support. I leaned back against the cold tiles, feeling a sense of comfort, knowing that help was on the way. After waiting for what felt like forever, there was a knock on the toilet door with the whispering voice of my brother. "Ari, are you the one inside?" "Yes, Matt," I replied as I opened the door. Without a word, he handed me the bag, a reassuring smile on his face. "Thanks, Matt," I murmured, feeling a surge of affection for my brother. "I don't know what I would do without you." Matthew simply shrugged, his expression warm. "That's what big brothers are for, right? Now go take care of yourself. I'll be waiting right outside before I get called a pervert." As I emerged from the restroom, he was still patiently waiting for me. "You all set now?" he inquired with a friendly smile. "Yep, all good," I responded, reciprocating with a brief hug, which he gladly accepted. Deciding to indulge in some window shopping together, we strolled leisurely through the bustling mall. However, as we approached the men's tuxedo collection store that Matthew was keen on exploring, my heart skipped a beat as I glimpsed Gabriel inside. Alas, I couldn't warn Matthew in time, as his attention was fully captured by a suit that had piqued his interest, causing him to collide with Gabriel. As Gabriel's face shifted from surprise to annoyance, I felt a surge of panic. Without a second thought, I darted away, putting as much distance between myself and my brother as possible. The bustling crowd swallowed me up as I hurriedly navigated through the throngs of shoppers. Breathless and flustered, I finally slowed my pace, my heart still racing. It was then that I carelessly collided with a solid, masculine figure. Looking up, I found myself locking eyes with a strikingly handsome man, towering above me with an unreadable expression. I'm sorry, I wasn't watching where I was going," I stammered, feeling a flush of embarrassment creeping up my cheeks. The handsome man's expression, initially unreadable, turned grave as he looked down at me. "Skylar?" he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. My heart sank as confusion washed over me. "I'm sorry. You must have mistaken me for someone else," I replied, trying to mask my growing unease. He shook his head, his gaze piercing before replying with a roughest and terrifying tone that creeped me out. "Don't play games with me, Skylar. How small this world is. You thought I would never find you." I froze, my mind racing to comprehend the situation. Who was this man, and why did he think I was someone named Skylar? The cold demeanour in his eyes sent a shiver down my spine, and I instinctively took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm not Skylar," I insisted, my voice trembling with fear. "You've got the wrong person." But the man didn't seem convinced. His eyes narrowed as he took a step closer, his presence looming over me like a dark cloud. "Where were you hiding all this time?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. "I've been searching for you everywhere. And now that I've found you, you're not getting away again." Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. Whoever this man was, he was convinced that I was someone named Skylar, and he seemed determined to confront them, or me, whoever he believed me to be. "I swear, I don't know who you're talking about," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. "Please just let me go." But the man's grip on my arm tightened, his expression hardening with anger and frustration. I'm not falling for your lies, he spat, his voice laced with venom. You can't run from me anymore, Skylar. I'm taking you back home with me. With a surge of adrenaline, I wrenched myself free from his grasp and bolted through the crowd, my heart pounding in my ears. Panic clouded my thoughts as I weaved through the maze of shoppers, desperate to escape the clutches of this stranger who was convinced I was someone I wasn't. As I finally burst out of the mall into the open air, I didn't dare to look back, fearing that he might still be following me. My mind raced with questions, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Who was Skylar, and why did this man think I was her? And what did he mean by consequences? Shaken to the core, I pulled out my phone and dialed my brother's number, praying that he would pick up and come to my rescue once again. As the phone rang, I cast a nervous glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see the stranger lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce. Matt, it's me, I blurted out as soon as he answered, my voice trembling with fear. Something terrible has happened. I need you to come get me now. Okay, Ari, stay calm. Matthew's voice came through the phone, his tone urgent yet reassuring. Where are you? I'm outside the mall, somewhere safer, I replied, my voice trembling as I glanced around nervously. Ari, listen to me, he said firmly. If you feel like you're in danger, it's safer for you to stay in a public place where there are people around. Understand? As I listened to his words, a sense of relief washed over me. I hadn't even considered the safety of staying within the crowd. That didn't occur to me, I admitted sheepishly. I'll go back inside, but don't tell Gabriel or Ethan. They'd be worried sick. Got it, Matthew replied. Just be careful, Ari. I'll be there as fast as I can. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. Matthew's words made sense, and I knew he was right. It was safer to stay in a public place where there were people. As I turned to head back into the mall, I felt a sudden strong grip on my arm. Panic flared up as I instinctively opened my mouth to scream, but before I could make a sound, a rough hand clamped over my mouth, muffling my cries. My eyes widened in terror, and I struggled against the iron grip, but it was no use. Shh! Stay quiet, a voice whispered harshly in my ear, sending chills down my spine. I twisted and turned, trying to break free, but the grip only tightened. Then I felt a cloth pressed against my nose and mouth, a strong chemical odour filling my nostrils. I tried to hold my breath, but it was too late. The world around me started to blur, and a heavy drowsiness began to take over. My limbs felt like lead, and my vision darkened. As consciousness slowly returned to me, I felt a throbbing ache in my head, and my eyelids fluttered open. Blinking against the harsh light, I found myself in an unfamiliar room, surrounded by opulent furnishings and luxurious decor. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to piece together what had happened. Memories of being pulled away and a cloth pressed against my face flooded back, sending a wave of fear coursing through me. Panic rising, I struggled to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through my head, forcing me to lie back down. My mind raced with questions. Where was I? Who had kidnapped me? And most importantly, how could I escape? Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I forced myself to assess my surroundings. The room was adorned with expensive-looking furniture and intricate tapestries, suggesting that whoever had brought me here had wealth and power. As I tried to push myself up again, the door to the room creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. My heart leapt into my throat as I braced myself for the worst. But to my surprise, it was not the kidnapper who entered, but a woman with gentle eyes and a sympathetic smile. Her smile disappeared as she closed the door behind her, walking toward me with a mix of anger and concern etched on her face. Leaning closer, she whispered urgently, "How did Mr. Anderson found you, Skylar? You promised me he would never find you." Confused and scared, I looked up at the woman, my mind spinning. "There was a misunderstanding," I stammered, my voice shaky. "I'm not Skylar. They got the wrong person." Before the woman could respond, the door swung open again, and the man who had mistaken me for someone named Skylar entered the room. His presence was commanding, and he exuded a cold, dangerous aura. "Disappear," he ordered the woman, his voice sharp and authoritative. The woman shot me a worried glance before rushing out of the room, closing the door behind her. The man approached me with a cocky yet angry smile, his eyes never leaving mine. "Well, well, well," he said, his eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and fury. "Look who I have in my clutches again. Tell me something, my darling wife. When you ran away, did it ever cross your mind that I would find you?" My heart pounded even harder as his words sank in. Wife? What was he talking about? Fear and confusion twisted inside me as I struggled to form a coherent response. "I'm not your wife," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've got the wrong person." His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Are you trying to say I'm crazy? Do you think I wouldn't recognize my own wife?" "You have to believe me," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but I swear I'm not the person you think I am." He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine, and I could see the intensity in his eyes. The scent of his cologne was overwhelming, making me feel even more trapped. "You can play this game all you want, but it won't change anything. You're mine, and you're going to pay for what you've done." Terror gripped me as I realized the gravity of the situation. This man was convinced I was someone named Skylar, his supposed wife, and he wasn't going to let me go easily. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but all I could see was his relentless gaze and the inescapable reality of my predicament. Agitated and furious, I felt my voice rise in desperation. "What do I have to do to make you believe I'm not—" My words were cut off abruptly by a sharp slap across my face, the force of it sending a searing wave of pain through my cheek. The metallic tang of blood filled my mouth. "Well," he sneered, leaning in closer, his breath hot against my skin. "Are you familiar with that?" Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but fear and shock paralyzed me. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as his sneer deepened. He seemed to take pleasure in my silence, a twisted satisfaction flickering in his eyes. "Answer me, wife," he demanded, his voice a low growl. "Do you understand now?" I swallowed hard, the taste of blood still fresh on my tongue. Slowly I nodded, knowing it was the response he wanted. Defiance would only bring more pain, and I couldn't afford that right now. Not when every part of me ached with the need to survive. Suddenly, a noise like a gunshot rang out from outside, startling us both. His grip loosened slightly, as his attention was momentarily diverted. Seizing the opportunity, I pulled away and stumbled towards the door. My heart pounded as I fumbled with the handle, desperation fueling my every movement. "Get back here!" he bellowed, but I was already out, sprinting down the dimly hallway. My vision blurred with tears. I had no idea where the exit was, but I didn't stop or look back. All I could think about was escape, finding safety, and surviving this terror. I ran, my feet pounding against the cold, hard floor of the hallway. My breath came in ragged gasps, tears blurring my vision. The sound of my own heartbeat echoed in my ears, a relentless drumbeat of fear and desperation. His hand shot out, gripping my arm with a vice-like strength that sent a jolt of pain up my shoulder. I gasped, the sound caught between a whimper and a scream. He yanked me back, pulling me against his chest. His breath was hot and harsh against my ear as he snarled. "Was the slap not enough to remind you?" His voice was thick with menace, each word dripping with anger. "Let me go!" I screamed, struggling against his hold. "I'm not your wife." He ignored my pleas, hoisting me over his shoulder effortlessly. I pounded my fists against his back, kicking and writhing, but his grip was unyielding. He carried me back into the room, but instead of stopping, he turned sharply and pushed open a hidden door. A dimly lit hallway stretched out before us, flanked by flickering lamps casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Where are you taking me?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fear. He growled, a low, threatening sound. It looks like you knocked your head when you ran. You're still acting stubborn. But no worries, wife. I'll knock your head back to your reality. We reached the end of the hallway, and he opened another door. He flicked on a switch, and red lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. My eyes widened in fear and apprehension as I took in my surroundings. The room was a nightmarish gallery of bondage and discipline, submission and masochism, a true BDSM dungeon. As my eyes adjusted to the eerie red light, I took in the full extent of what surrounded me. Every wall, every corner, was adorned with implements of control and pain. Directly across from the bed, a large wooden St. Andrew's cross stood ominously, its surface gleaming in the dim light. Chains and leather straps dangled from their arms, ready to secure anyone who was forced against it. To the right of the cross, a spanking bench sat, its padded surface inviting in the most sinister way. Various floggers, paddles, and canes hung on the wall nearby, each one looking more painful than the last. A tall steel frame occupied another corner of the room, equipped with cuffs and spreader bars designed to hold someone in a vulnerable spread-eagle position. Next to it, a bondage chair with numerous straps and buckles seemed designed for prolonged, uncomfortable restraint. Against another wall, there was a rack of assorted whips from short, stingy crops to long, multi-tailed cat-o'-nine-tails. Hanging beside them were ropes of different lengths and thicknesses, ready for intricate shibari work or simple, restrictive binds. A table covered in an array of smaller devices drew my attention next. There were ball gags, bit gags, and ring gags, each one meant to silence any screams. Clamps of various sizes and designs were laid out, some connected by delicate chains. Vibrators and dildos in a variety of shapes and sizes, some with straps for forced use, added to the collection. Electrostimulation devices sat ominously alongside them, wires and pads ready to deliver controlled shocks. In another corner, a suspension rig with a winch system hung from the ceiling, its ropes ready to hoist someone off the ground. Leather hoods and masks, some with built-in blindfolds and gags, were neatly arranged on shelves next to it. A medical examination table with stirrups was positioned nearby, alongside a trolley with speculums, forceps, and other instruments more commonly seen in a doctor's office than a bedroom. Finally, the bed itself was a testament to the perverse nature of the room. Wide and sturdy, with heavy poles at each corner, it was equipped with cuffs and chains, ready to hold someone in place. The mattress was covered in dark, slick material, easy to clean and resistant to stains. Fear gripped my heart as I realized that this room was not just a collection of tools, it was a manifestation of his darkest desires, a place where control and submission were the only rules. My mind raced, searching for any possible escape from this chamber of horrors. He slumped me onto the bed with a force that knocked the breath from my lungs. I landed hard against the slick surface, the cold metal poles digging into my back. Gasping for air, I scrambled backwards, my hands slipping on the smooth material beneath me. Without saying another word, he towered over me, his presence overwhelming in the confined space of the room. His eyes bore into mine, dark and intense, filled with a mixture of rage and something far more sinister. I knew then, with a sinking dread, that escape was no longer an option. I tried to push myself further away, but my back hit the headboard, trapping me against the bed. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing through the room like a drum of impending doom. The red light cast eerie shadows across his face, emphasizing the cruel twist of his lips. "You thought you could run from me?" he sneered, his voice low and dangerous. "You thought you could defy me and get away with it?" I tried to scramble away, but his hands were too quick. He grabbed my wrists and pinned them above my head, his grip ironclad. I thrashed beneath him, but it was no use. He was much stronger than me, and his weight kept me firmly in place. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. I could feel his hot breath on my face, smell the mix of swaya, and something darker, more sinister. Panic surged through me, and I kicked my legs, trying to dislodge him. He responded by pressing his body down harder, making it nearly impossible for me to move. "Struggle all you want," he said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It only makes this more fun for me." My eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for something, anything that could help me. But all I saw were instruments of pain and control, reminders of how hopeless my situation was. Tears welled up in my eyes again, and I bit my lip to keep from sobbing. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Let me go, I'm not your wife." He laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said, leaning in closer. With one hand still holding my wrists, he used the other to reach for a set of cuffs attached to the bedposts. My heart pounded as he snapped the first cuff around my wrist, then the other, securing me in place. I pulled against the restraints, but they were too tight, too strong. "Please," I begged, my voice breaking. "Don't do this." His only response was a dark chuckle as he fastened the collar around my neck, the leather cool and unyielding against my skin. He lifted the ball gag, and despite my attempts to turn away, he forced it into my mouth, securing it tightly behind my head. My screams were reduced to muffled whimpers, my pleas for mercy swallowed by the gag. "That's better," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Now, let's begin, wife." My heart pounded with such ferocity. It felt like it might burst from my chest. Bound and gagged, every breath was a struggle, every thought a desperate cry for freedom. He took a step back, his eyes raking over me with a mixture of possessiveness and malice. I could feel his gaze lingering on my restrained form. He turned away, moving towards the table of instruments. The sound of his footsteps echoed ominously in the confined space, each step a prelude to the torment that awaited. I pulled at my restraints, the cuffs digging painfully into my wrists, but they held fast. Panic surged through me, my mind racing for a way out, a way to escape this nightmare. "Ah, this should do nicely," he murmured, lifting a flogger from the table. He tested its weight, swinging it experimentally through the air. The leather tails made a soft, menacing sound as they cut through the silence. He turned back to me, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Now, wife," he said, his voice a dark whisper. "It's time to remind you of your place." He approached the bed, the flogger held loosely in one hand. I tried to squirm away, my body straining against the cuffs, but it was futile. His presence loomed over me, a shadow of menace. With a flick of his wrist, the flogger came down, the leather tails striking my thigh with a stinging bite. I cried out, the sound muffled by the gag, tears streaming down my face. "Do you feel that?" he taunted, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "That's the price of defiance." He brought the flogger down again and again, each strike a searing reminder of my helplessness. My cries filled the room, though they were little more than muffled whimpers. I thrashed against the bed, the restraints biting into my skin, but there was no escape. Just as I thought I could bear no more, he stopped, his breathing heavy. He leaned over me, his face inches from mine. His eyes were dark, filled with a twisted pleasure that sent a chill down my spine. "You see, wife," he whispered, his breath hot against my skin. "This is where you belong. At my mercy, completely under my control." He reached out, tracing a finger along the tear-streaked path on my cheek. I flinched at his touch, my body recoiling instinctively. His smile widened, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. I realized then that my cries and struggles only fed his sadistic pleasure. The more I fought, the more he reveled in my terror. A wave of resignation washed over me. There was no escape, no relief from this nightmare. My body ached from the flogging, and my spirit felt on the verge of breaking. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stop struggling, to stop giving him the satisfaction of my fear. A new resolve formed within me. If I couldn't escape, I could at least deny him the pleasure of seeing my terror. I would endure whatever he planned without giving him the reactions he craved. With a deep breath, I forced my body to go still, my muscles to relax against the restraints. I braced myself for whatever came next, deciding to face it with silent defiance. Inwardly, I was breaking. Never in a million years had I imagined my first time would be like this. A pang of sorrow pierced my heart as I thought about my family, my brothers. How worried they must be now, not knowing where I was, if I was safe. A stream of tears ran down my face, each one a testament to my despair and regret. Why hadn't I listened to them? They had warned me not to go to the mall alone. They had told me it wasn't safe. I had brushed off their concerns, convinced that nothing bad could happen to me. Now I was paying the price for my recklessness. This was my fault. I had ignored their warnings, and now I was trapped in this hell, a prisoner to this monster's twisted desires. He watched me, his satisfaction faltering slightly as he realized I was no longer struggling. His hand gripped the flogger tighter, frustration flashing in his eyes. He wanted my terror, my screams. I would not give him the satisfaction. I would endure, silently, hoping that maybe if he sees that this is my first time, he will let me go. The thought brought a fresh wave of tears, but I blinked them away, determined not to give him the satisfaction. He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "What's this?" he taunted, his voice a cruel whisper. "Giving up already?" I said nothing, my eyes staring up at the ceiling, refusing to meet his gaze. Inside, I was trembling, but I forced myself to remain still, to show no reaction. "Interesting," he murmured, his tone laced with curiosity. "Let's see how long you can keep that up." As he moved away to select another instrument of torment, I closed my eyes, a fresh wave of tears slipping down my cheeks. I thought of my brothers, of their laughter, their protective and warm hugs. I held on to those memories, using them to steel myself against the pain that was sure to come. He moved to the table of implements, selecting a set of clamps connected by a delicate chain. The sight of them filled me with fresh horror. He approached me slowly, savouring my fear once more. With careful precision, he attached the clamps to my nipples, tightening them until pain shot through my chest. I cried out, the sound muffled by the gag. He gave the chain a gentle tug, and I felt the searing pain intensify, tears blurring my vision further. He moved towards me, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent intensity. With a slow, deliberate motion, he began to undress. The sound of fabric rustling filled the room, a prelude to the horror unfolding before me. As he shed his clothes, my eyes were drawn to the bulge straining against his underwear. A surge of panic coursed through me. I'd never seen anything like it before, and the thought of that monstrous appendage tearing through me filled me with dread. I tried to look away, but my gaze was irresistibly drawn back to the sight. My thoughts spiraled, each one more frantic than the last. Would that thing tear me apart? Could I even survive this? The questions looped in my mind, a relentless torment. He moved to the other side of the bed, retrieving something from a tiny sealed plastic bag. Inside was a single pill. Before I could process the significance, he grabbed my face and removed the gag from my mouth. I gasped, about to speak, but before I could utter a word, he forced the pill into my mouth. His hands clamped over my mouth and nose, cutting off my air until I had no choice but to swallow the pill. It slid down my throat painfully, and then he replaced the gag, ensuring I couldn't spit it out. He then turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my fear and the growing numbness spreading through my body. When he returned, he carried a large medical bag, placed it on the table, and then turned towards me. He approached me again, his eyes unreadable now. With deft movements, he undid the cuffs, but my relief was short-lived because my body was already succumbing to the effects of the pill. I felt numb, weak, and utterly helpless. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me to a spreader bar. He spread my legs wide, clasping my feet tightly in place. I tried to speak, to ask him what he was going to do, but my words came out weak and slurred. What are you? My voice trailed off as the world around me started to fade, The last thing I saw was him pulling out something that looked like a catheter and a syringe. My eyes snapped open, and a heavy headache throbbed in my skull as I reached up to touch my head. The movement made me aware of an IV drip inserted into my veins, and panic surged through me. I darted my gaze around the room. Memories flooded back in a rush, sending a chill down my spine as I realized where I was. In his room. I jolted upright, but felt something hard press against my stomach. Frantically, I threw aside the sheets that covered me. As I looked down, utter terror and disbelief gripped me. My stomach was swollen, unmistakably large. Before I could comprehend why, the door swung open, and a woman dressed like a nurse hurried in. Her eyes widened upon seeing me, and she rushed towards me. "Mrs. Anderson, you need to lie back down," she urged, her voice tinged with concern and urgency. I swatted her hands away in panic, tearing the IV out of my vein. Blood spurted from the needle site, and I yelped in fear. "I need to get out of here, my brothers must be worried." The nurse gently but firmly guided me back onto the bed, whisper yelling, "Calm down, Mrs. Anderson. What you're doing isn't safe for you or the baby." Frozen against her grip, I looked up at her. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're 5 months pregnant, Mrs. Anderson," she replied softly, her expression a mix of compassion and confusion. I looked down at my swollen stomach in disbelief, then back at her, then down again. How is this possible? Why am I pregnant? Is it his?" I turned back to her, desperation in my voice. "Does this mean I've been lying here for 5 months?"